Welcome to the Washdown podcast, and today is a special episode of the podcast. James and I got to sit down with Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas, and we had a great conversation, had a great time filming this episode. We talked about a lot of stuff, and again, we'd like to thank the Mayor Q for taking the time to sit down and talk to us. So I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And thanks for watching. And here is a special episode of the Washdown podcast with Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas.
Through with anything, and so we just get like rolling and lose track of the whole subject.
Well, that's how you get a 2-hour podcast. You talk about what you're talking about for 10 minutes, and then for an hour and 50 minutes you talk about.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Right.
But brother, welcome. Thank you for coming on the Washdown podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got the Mayor of Kansas City, Mayor Quinton Lucas. Q.
How y'all doing today? Welcome up to City Hall, which I consider just a fire station that we don't have all the equipment for yet.
Well, you got the helmet. I think you're good.
I know, man. The helmet looks good. That's about all I can handle.
We need to install like a 29-floor pole.
I can already see the insurance people right now.
I know.
No.
Yeah,
Shut him up.
They're going to be calling like, don't let him talk again. But no, it's good to be with y'all.
Well, thank you for coming on. One of the things, so we've, the basis of this podcast, we discuss mental health and law enforcement, nursing, fire, EMS. But what we've never really done is thought about, like, what's the person over all of them doing? What's the person over a municipality do? How's his mental health? Everyone's like, oh, our mayor, damn it, this and that. And
I see that. I see y'all on Facebook. Yeah, I know what's up.
But, in all of our careers, we always preach, hey, check in on one another. Mm-hmm. How are you doing? How's your friend doing? How's Q doing? It's been a
it's been wild, man.
Pretty rough couple years.
Yeah, it's I appreciate that because oddly enough, I don't know if almost anybody in these last 2-3 years has asked that question. Usually you're the one trying to make sure that everything else is good, dealing with the balance, the different people. Just last week, I'll give an example, and I think this tells how I've been feeling. We got a budget done, and I'm not going to get too political, but I appreciate we were able to give everybody in the city apparatus pay raises, from fire to sanitation, police, everybody. But I ticked off a group of people who wanted to do a whole bunch of other things with the budget. So somebody, was calling me last week, and they're like, we going to get rid of you. You ain't for your community. You sold yourself out, all that sort of stuff. And I'd be lying if I didn't say it gets to you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because you're trying your best, you're doing your best, and particularly for people who've known you for a long time, to sometimes roll like that is disappointing. And so, a few things that have helped me a lot. Not that it's a fail-safe, but I've been better at when I get home. I've got a now almost year-old baby. It's cool.
So you ain't sleeping.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. But I could just look at him, the adventure of like a baby. Like, why are they into crawling over there? I don't know, but I just enjoy watching it. And it's better than taking calls from certain people at that hour. No disrespect to some of our constituents. And then I do that. I've gotten better at like trying to walk, which is just weird. Not even like running, whatever, but just going to a different neighborhood of Kansas City and just going on walks. And the coolest thing about that is I'll be walking around. I was up Northland, far, far northeast, off Stark, and I was just like bumping into people. And you at first think you're like, oh, is this a block where I've annoyed somebody? Do they work for the city? Whatever else. And most people are just like, hey, what's up, man? And then later they're just like, have I seen you somewhere? You a weatherman on something? Like, yeah, you're the skinny black dude from Channel 9, right? No, I'm like, no. But and then even when they learn, it's just chill, because you realize after you cut through all of everybody's a human being. We're all trying to do our best, and that has been what helps me. But some days I think I just have to keep it in balance and know that you'll get through a moment. Back in 2020, I think we all remember that was a wild year, particularly for those who were listening in law enforcement, anybody who's in government. We're dealing with huge budget challenges, and you get protests, you have COVID, you have people dying of COVID. I know y'all who are running calls, God bless you, dealing with so much of that. And I think all I was able to do at the end of each night was like, this too shall pass. And that's a big part of what I do. And then try to make sure I take care of myself and my family.
Well, and that's what, like, we like, I guess it's a luxury. You know, we're working for the fire department. Like, everybody's happy when we show up. Everybody's happy when we problem solve because they call us because they can't problem solve.
Right.
Nobody's a internet firefighter when we show up to put a house out. But people can easily become an internet mayor when they're not happy with the decision. And you, more than most, are involved because you, quite frankly, you give a shit. You know that.
That's right.
And so it's hard. I could only imagine just I mean, hell, you've even shared some of the stuff people have said. Mm-hmm. That's not why you got in this job.
Right. You know, it is interesting. So because sometimes I've had people along the way who say, hey, man, why don't you just engage less or deal with less hate? And I was big on making sure when I got into this, I didn't want to be, and this is no disrespect to the business people and all that, I didn't want to just be a Chamber of Commerce mayor, right? I didn't like that approach in some of our past leaders that kind of, it feels like they're working for a whole bunch of people who don't live in Kansas City half the time, ain't worried about some of the stuff we do. So that's why I try to get into it, and I think that if you're straight and direct, you can have a narrative. Sometimes it annoys the heck out of people, but you try to do that because I always think authenticity can prevail, rather than just, saying, all right, well, I ain't worried about it. And it's hard to unseat a mayor anyway, so I'm just going to move on my merry way. And so that's why I've kind of chalked it up. Sometimes I probably do need to just log off earlier or not take that call. And we all get there, right? I mean, you have these moments where something gets under your skin. And I realize, my wife's good at telling me this, like, it's never gone well. So there are times when I need to just, like, if I'm mad when I'm home or if somebody's like, he's the worst ever, what I don't need to do is fight him forever. But I do think it is important, particularly in America where there's so much information, and I ain't getting into the deep politics, but, everybody's got a different viewpoint. Even like during COVID, I talked about this. Like, I don't know. I was always like, I don't know the real impact, what's happening and all that sort of stuff. This is why I'm making my choice. And that's what I think our voters and everybody deserves. That you tell them, look, on this information, this is why I did what I did. You may not change them. You may be wrong ultimately, but I think that's what the people of Kansas City want and respect.
And a lot of times on this episode, on this podcast, Jeremy and I have talked a lot about just servant leadership, right? And I think you saw just as much as we did. COVID had a real nice way of exposing the bosses versus the leaders.
Sure did.
Who was still in the front lines, So you've exemplified that or tried to, or, depending on who would say what, like your goal has been tried to exemplify servant leadership in the city. What's that like on a daily basis? What's your thought process constantly going through the head, not to necessarily maintain that image, but maintain the style you want?
It is step one, understanding what people are doing. Something, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. I was talking to some other mayors from other cities in America last week, Oakland, Oklahoma City, others, and they were asking me, are your people back at work? And I'm like, well, that's the wrong way to see it because a bunch of my people never stopped working. And I think, as y'all remember better than most, particularly when like this was brand new and people are dying and you didn't know and we didn't have a vaccine and weren't wearing masks at the beginning, I was scared for everybody, every frontline worker who was showing up for the city every single day, and a whole bunch of y'all did. And so for me, a few small things that I did, I was like, I'm coming into City Hall. And yes, it's a very different job coming into City Hall than going on a call like y'all do. But I was like, I'm going to be here because they need to know, no, I can't sit from my couch and just be kind of like, hey, everybody, I'm Zooming.
Zoom calls.
Right. Hey, God bless you. Thanks for doing this.
With like just the suit and short bottoms.
Like, I'm here eating lunch while you're, out risking your life. I mean, and look, we got different gigs and roles in the world. So, I don't like those fake leaders that'll just like show up somewhere where they're not supposed to be. But at the same time, I thought I would keep exhibiting what I'm supposed to do. I think another thing that was big for me throughout it was, make sure you're listening to people. Make sure you're talking to people and letting them know for real what's up. One example, our budget was destroyed in 2020, right? We stopped getting revenues in, taxes aren't coming in. And so what that meant for a lot of our workers was we were like, hey, can you handle a pay freeze for a year? And even fire, we held up the contract negotiations for it, not just a year, but a little bit longer. And I think on that's another one where you're telling people, this is where we're coming from. This is the sacrifice that we're having to make. But if you're communicating with them and not being adversarial unnecessarily.
Because that's a hard sell. Like,
I was.
Hey, we know you've been dying and busting your ass for the last year.
Yeah.
but just hold off on that pay raise you thought you were like.
Yes. Right.
That's not something you just throw out in an email at 4:59 on a Friday.
That's exactly right.
Well, no, but it's like what you said. If you let people know what's going on, if you're honest and transparent with them, I mean, that's all people want.
That's right.
Is, hey, what are our leaders doing? And are they being upfront with us and honest?
Right.
And as long as you're doing that, I think 90% of people are going to go, yeah, we're on board. Let's all pull together and let's get through this. I mean, you're obviously always going to have those outliers. You know what I'm talking about.
And sometimes they're more vocal than that's the thing.
They normally are.
Right.
It's called the silent majority for a reason.
Exactly. You're right. And I think for me, what was important, because if I believed everything that was written about me, just like, and sometimes I even try to tell this, like if I visit a high school, right? Because you get these kids that get destroyed by social media or something. And I'm like, you gotta log off of it. You gotta realize that there is, to your point on the silent majority, there's a bigger reality out there. And I think that's exemplified in Kansas City of all levels. I'm not sucking up to y'all. It's really like everybody. It's the fact that everybody keeps showing up to work. You all were an example of this through your own tragedies at fire, but most recently we had those sanitation workers who died in a horrendous accident. And by the way, I commend our first responders who showed up to, try to save lives and manage 2 for 1. But, what impressed me, I was at a funeral on one day, like next day, people are out, picking up trash, doing their job. And I think that's a lot of people. A lot of people do these jobs and work for a city, I think, for more than just money or whatever, because you believe in what you're doing and you believe in your service to people, no matter what it is. And so I try to make sure every single person who works for this institution knows that they're respected out of it. Sometimes we don't deliver it right. Sometimes you get in battles with their leadership, looking at you, police department. But nevertheless, it's a thing of, and you try to cut through and just say, hey, even if we're in a fight I haven't been in a fight with this fire chief, but let's say, even if there is an issue, you try to, that's why I like getting on either social media or elsewhere, because I'm like, it ain't about y'all. Yeah, there are things that we're about, but, we're still trying to look out for you. And that's helped me sometimes, even when I'm about to get in a public fight, know that maybe this ain't the time to pick it, because our workers don't need to see that the city manager and the mayor and the council all yelling at each other, because then they're like, what the hell is this institution? And so trying to be a peacemaker, trying to make sure folks know they're appreciated, doing even goofy things and it's so interesting because I love anytime
playing basketball in a tie.
Oh, Lord, man. And I got clowned on for
that Halloween costume was priceless.
Day. Man, and I tried to wear some Jordans the other day. You see that too? And every 17-year-old in the city's like, oh, he lame, But so you try to do that. You try to relate, and I think for the most part it works out.
So something that we've kind of been fighting really as a country, the last, it almost seems like just 10 years, is just the rise in crime.
Yeah.
Our city's been no different by it. We've experienced the same heartache.
Yeah.
It goes all the way down to the frontline police officers, firefighters that are, having to clean that up and pick that up. When you have to, you better stop messing with that mic.
You adjusted it earlier, and now it's not.
Guess you got to hold it.
Yeah. Just sit here like this for the rest of the episode.
You look like a DJ the whole time, man.
But obviously, you as the mayor, those are your people, not even your voters, just your constituents, That's people. You're responsible for the city. When you see that, we experience that heartache in the 5, 10, 20 minutes we're there on scene. We're going to the next one. You deal with it so much longer. How much of a toll is that taking on you?
Huge toll, man. And something that I probably need to think about more. You were talking about how you cope with things, and I know we've done better. Local 42 cares. I think Fraternal Order Police has set up some more stuff, but it is processing some of that because, we all have our different jobs to do, and we have to get up the next day and try to fix it. But we should never tolerate two kids getting murdered, we should, and it's just that stuff that does stick with you. I think the thing that gets me going is to sit back and be very self-critical and where did some part of society fail? And I don't take it as a personal thing, but I'm like, you know what? If we kept that summer program going, if we had that sort of thing, would that have meant something for that child to have an activity not getting that same path? And so for me, I think what inspires me is that we need to do better, and that it can't just be something where I look the other way. I mean, one thing back when I was running, I was like, it's just weird to be a mayor and just do nothing but ribbon cuttings when you got people dying on the streets. Now, it takes a balance, I've learned, because you can't just be the guy who's like, everything's awful. Leave. Or else I'd be like, damn,
That does not inspire
the
confidence.
world is ending.
right. Don't be happy. But, but at the same time, it's like, okay, because I think this is real about Kansas City. I think we all see this. It's a good place to live. It's a good spot, nice people, whatever. You can have good opportunities, do decent stuff. We got some real challenges, right? And just, I always like to say, on the positive side, imagine that we had the same place, but, right, we didn't have 160 homicides if we, had infrastructure that was improved, right? Those sorts of things, and getting people to know that, yeah, they can have that. And so that's where I see the work in this job to be.
Well, and that's like, something for me, especially, being a paramedic, we run that shooting or that real bad call or whatever, that bad wreck. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've got the 5 to 15 minute window, and then I'm done. I'm moving on. I'm on to the next call. But even still, I think anybody that truly gives a shit about their job is going to stress over whether or not they did it right.
Right.
So I will always have those, did I push that right med? Not like critical error, but, did I do this at the right time? Could we have done this differently? What if I would have thought of this earlier? You, on the other hand, come in the morning and here's a plate of shit that happened.
Yeah.
And, you don't get the luxury of 15 minutes and, give me a new plate to deal with.
Right.
You're stuck with it. That's got to be hard.
Yeah, it is. I'll give an example. I'll break news on this podcast because it's, the best one, and I ain't giving it to the Star. And I ain't going to even talk about them. But, it is this sort of recognizing maybe you've made mistakes along the way, but that you can continue to do better. I'll give a really direct example from kind of my life. So my sister and her children live out in East KC. Her oldest son's in the Army now, so we're happy with what he's done. But my niece is like a 17-year-old, and she was going to Raytown High School, and she just dropped out, which I'm trying to get her back in and all of that. But I was talking to my mom, and I was like, so where'd this happen? She's like, well, after they stopped going to school, a year and a half ago, she just never really went back. And, and then part of me can be like, how many might we have lost at that time? Was there a better way to do things and all of that? And you can wallow in that, and indeed you should study it and see where we went wrong. But for me, it's more about, all right, understanding that I may have a generation of youth in our city that are impacted that way. How do I get them back in school? How do I, if they're not going back to school, get them to job opportunities, GED programs, so they can try to do jobs in Kansas City government, and I think that's how you do it, knowing that you will make mistakes, you will be imperfect, but the bigger thing is, how do you improve it? How do you try to make sure that we get beyond it in some way? Because the real story is, just like the city's life never ends, she's 17. Her life ain't done, right? You can say, all right, maybe 15, 16, we weren't all we needed to be. But how do we make it better for her and for everybody like her in our community?
Well, that's something I didn't even think about, too. You can obviously, on the paper, you can plan for a budget. You can, you can say, here's our on-paper strategy, how to recover this. There's no on-paper strategy for mental health.
That's right.
And not only do you have to take care of you and your wife and your kid and your family, you got about 500,000 other people you got to consider. I mean, because that is your city, and we've had basically a 2-year gap and just a lot of services, and that's
yeah. It was the hardest part, and and God, we're never perfect, but we had a lot of activities for youth. I feel like we were doing better at a bunch of things, and when you just freeze that for a long time. And when you freeze the ability for people to even congregate, to be around each other, that was something that was tough, and that pushed us a little bit earlier than a lot of other large cities. I know I got my haters out there who hated everything we did, but that said, compared to a bunch of these places that kept orders longer and all that sort of stuff, we pulled back in Kansas City, I think, at a responsible approach and clip, because I was, and I think many of us started to see, wait a minute, human beings need to be around each other in some way. We need to communicate. A big part of our mental health and our sanity really is not just talking to someone who's a professional, but it's also being around other people and hearing like, okay, I'm concerned about this, but I see that I'm not alone, or there are many things that I can be happy about in life. There are all these sorts of things. And I think what we need to come out of this pandemic realizing is, we talk about how we saw that comorbidities are a big issue. I hope people also think about how mental health is in its own way kind of a comorbidity in the sense of limiting life outcomes, and how we can make it sure we're sustained investing in better healthcare opportunities for our folks. For me, that usually starts with city workers. How do we make sure that mental health is something that's covered, respected, appreciated, and understood? For the broader public, how do we make sure we talk about it? Because, the homicide number gets on the news a lot, but as you guys know better than most, we have a lot of suicides in this city that kind of often rivals that homicide number and exceeds it in some years. And making sure that we actually amplify that there are resources to talk to is something that this is a health department issue that we need to do more of, and something that I think our new health director, Dr. Marvia Jones, is committed to.
Yeah, and that was one of the things with the pandemic. The suicide rate did go up considerably. Yeah. And it's like you said, people need to be around people. And that's one of the biggest lies, especially whenever you're in depression or you're suffering from PTSD or something like that. Your brain will tell you you're the only one who ever felt this way.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, everybody goes through stuff, and it's okay to reach out. You just have to take that step to reach out. That's right. And having more programs in place and letting people know what those programs are and how it's available. I mean, that's the biggest issue.
Right.
I mean, well, not the biggest issue. I mean, the biggest issue is we need people to run those programs.
Yeah.
But,
and we need to make sure, like, they're funded and seen as important as a new rig, right? I mean, it's easy for us, and this is what I try to avoid in government. You talked about the budget before, right? It's easy to say, all right, this year's fire budget, $170 million, and we're going to buy these trucks, we're going to do this thing, and people are going to get a this % salary increase. But a good manager and leader, and it's what I've tried to push others in this institution to do, are like, and I'll ask the fire chief all the time, and I've asked the police chief this too, like, how's morale? And every now and then because they got a job to do, and every now and then those different leaders will be like, well, morale will be really good. I'm like, this ain't a political question. I know you want $10 million more.
Yeah.
But no, for real, like, if you can talk to people in a certain way, what are they saying? Where can we be better? What can they know about Kansas City that makes it better? For me, it's like, is it putting a fire truck in the Chiefs parade, which we did, right? And that was wonderful, right? And I think it shows people the love that they can get. Is it making sure that we post and make even more available where access to resources are, so people know they're not alone and not being judged if they avail themselves of it? And that's where I think a good city is going, and that's what I hope Kansas City's been doing.
And it's it's kind of hard to, and we've talked about this on the podcast before. So many times, like, because this, especially for just the good old in the dirt line workers, like it was hard.
Yeah,
it was hard when staffing, because people are on quarantine, and increase in sick people, increase in violence, just increase in calls, police, fire, the nurses in the ERs. Like we got our asses kicked, and we just so desperately wanted anything, and you could see the surface level, like, here's a pizza party versus you saw in some of these areas, those leaders like, hey, we're running calls with you. We're out here on the floor with you. We're in the dispatch, whatever it may be. Like, we're here. Like, because that was almost the only thing you could do. But at the same time, and we've talked about this before, we've complained and, just like a couple people like, well, why aren't they doing this? Well, they have lives too. And responsibility doesn't change once you get in management. It just increases.
Right.
And, like, how do you balance the mental health of like, hey, here's the organization, here's the city I still have to run, but I then still have to worry about the lowest of the low employee because they are just as important. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in that position, thank God. But
yeah, it was a and it's always a challenging balance. But the thing that there are a few things that I've done that I think worked very well, and I'll go back with my public works guys real quick as an example. The guys who drive the trucks when it's the snowplow folks, right? I did like a day just riding with one. And it was interesting for him because he's like, there's literally never been a mayor who's been in one of these trucks. Like, I don't even know why you're here. And it's funny because you learn about all your issues real quick. Because I'm like, y'all got shocks in this thing or whatever? He's like, I've been complaining about that for 50 years. Ended up with, anyway, I won't be inappropriate, but it's like, he's like, I'm sore every day. But, and spending that time. Or, I remember I was still staying over at 19th and Paseo at the time. And unfortunately, that's the 18th and Vine district. There are a number of shootings. And so one day, and I respect this officer so much, after they'd kind of, the folks had been moved and all of that. He's standing around on the scene and I'm like, hey man, how you doing? And he's like, I'm good. And actually to a point you had just made, and I said, I know a lot of stuff's going on, and right now, like, you're in the center of political debate, and you took a job not thinking you ever would be. And I said, so how you doing? He's like, look, man, I go home. I just want to see my family. I want to get back to my family safely, but I appreciate you talking to me. And, hey, maybe he hated me, maybe he didn't like me, but I hope he saw for a few minutes that, like, somebody cares to listen. And I think that's where good leaders make a difference. If you sit there and listen, a lot of people like to, and I've been on the council or mayor now for 7 years, a lot of people like to grandstand, and you've seen it. They'll be in the city council meeting and like, you are our heroes. You're the most important ever, right? And then when the cameras cut off, you ain't seeing them again and ever. For me, it is a big, I'll go there and listen. Even if everybody's quiet. I say that to fire stations I go have dinner at because I feel like scare half the people there. They're just like, I'm not going to say anything while this dude's here.
We are trying not to get in trouble.
Exactly. Because I'm always like, how's it going? What's new? What would you change? Like,
hello, sir. Thank you for coming.
Right. We're good, man. Yeah. We're good. Yeah. Are you from here? Maybe.
What's your name? Matt.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, you try to do that and make sure you listen and show. And then I also think, because we do get a megaphone in the press and all of that, you try to pepper in something about, and I always try to do it with like talking about city workers, right? Or, rank and file people, right? I think that's how you try to do it rather than, kind of overlooking them too much.
How's your wife done through all this?
She
besides just being a straight trooper.
Yeah, she is. I mean, we're doing our anniversary in Springfield, Missouri soon because I'm giving a political speech. No offense to Springfield, but I don't think that's where she wanted to go. But
she's more of a Branson gal.
Yeah. Osceola or something, but I was like, she's been good. I think one thing I did have to tell her, because you know how it is, your families get offended more than you. And when people question you, and every now and then, the Star used to do like the annual very expensive firefighter story, and then everybody would do their whole like, oh my God. And I know that spouses often have gotten at me the most when those come out. I think my wife's been the same way of just, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm like, don't worry about it. She'll be like, but I was sent this thing from a blog. I'm like, don't worry about them. Like, I read them, but no, you don't need to.
Don't ever read the comments.
Exactly. Because there's all, and it's funny. It's human nature, right? You move to the negative, right? Yeah. 20 people can say, you're doing a hell of a job. And the one guy flicking me off at the St. Patrick's Day parade, I notice, But so I try to keep her from that. I think the other thing I've tried to do, and all of us, either who have spouses, girlfriends, or boyfriends, or family, or whatever, try to make sure that I do carve out time for just her and just my family. I got a few times, like Sundays, particularly Sunday afternoon, even I try not to get anything in. And then, like, to the extent I'm prepping for the week, then it's like at a certain time that night, I'll go back to do it. Because every other day, you're giving your all and all of that, but you need to make sure, no matter your job, no matter your schedule, that there is a time where they just get you. Not you that's burdened by 1,000 different things, but the you the Q, who's just like, yeah, I'm the dude you met, and I still am goofy and want to watch this terrible movie. Like, I love watching, like, movies with explosives and all that sort of stuff. And, like, you know, I've been watching, like, the Angel Has Fallen, Olympus Has Fallen series. I don't know if everybody watches those. But
everybody watches those.
Yeah, exactly. I know. We all do, because I'm like, I'm not worried about a damn thing for this 2 hours. And I'm going to see how this one guy with a pistol is going to, like, beat back all the terrorists taking over the White House, right? And so, I mean, it's doing that.
Do you go to your bodyguards after that and you're like, hey, I need you to do that? Like, here's the standard you're going to be held to. Is Gerard Butler.
Right, exactly. So, like, you know, even though there was one time my wife was just like, if you make me watch another movie with Morgan Freeman in it, I'm like, hey,
he's a saint.
He's in all the right movies. He's always the president or something, like saving the world. But
name a movie he's not in, and then we can watch that.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's part of it. Carving out that time, making sure you have that opportunity.
Well, because, I mean, definitely we have, you know, you think about, like, the fire spouse or the police spouse. And then the mayor spouse is not someone that there's, like, a huge conglomerate. There's not a Facebook group for mayor spouse.
That's true. That's true. Thank God. Wait, what do you do? Oh no, they ain't that busy. No, I think I think that's right. And you know, I think a few things that we have tried to do and that I've tried to make sure. One, it is listening and understanding. My wife works, and so it's also respecting kind of her schedule and knowing that we're trying to plan ahead. I'm blessed to have a mother still in town, and so get to talk to her. She helps look out for the baby, and it's just, you know, I think this speaks to the mental health point too. It's having that support network and not being too scared to engage with them at certain times, even if it is just going over to somebody's house to talk. And, you know, and so, like, I'll still go kick it with my mom and interrupt her viewing of The Equalizer. She don't turn the TV off CBS. She's except during football. She's like, oh, I cannot watch this anymore. But, you know, but like it's just rapping back and forth. And I think that's what can help a lot of people. I mean, the first responders that I've had a chance to talk to over the last several years, of which there are many, you know, when I hear a lot, I want people to feel free to share. And that's why it's hard to believe, but I even kind of like the disagreement, because
you learn.
Yeah,
you grow.
Right. And you do need a census of, like, what are people thinking and feeling. You can't just be like, well, that's just 20% of the city, I ain't gonna worry about them. But instead, it's like, okay, you know what, I could do better with this. I'll give an example, and they may not have liked the meeting. I met with police spouses, like, during protest time. And, you know, they were like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? And I don't think anybody came out of that room like a Quinton Lucas voter, but I hope they came out of the room like, you know what, he sat there for 2 hours and he listened and we engaged. And I will be absolutely honest with you. They may not believe it, but I learned stuff. I kind of learned a different way of processing it and thinking about it, because to me, and this is the problem with leaders sometimes, you start to see, if you don't talk to people, the fire department is this number of people, this budget, this equipment, whatever. The police department is this, and this. And you're not putting the people in it. And I think as long as you put people in everything you're doing, then you're actually getting somewhere where you're still likely to be effective.
Well, brother, it's been absolutely amazing. Like I said, it's nice to say, how's the mayor doing? You know, how's Q doing?
I appreciate that.
Whenever you do have time, because apparently you're busy being a mayor and shit, so who knows?
Nah.
We would love to have you back on, but it's just been nice, especially even for our perspective. Like we said, it's easy to account for how we feel, how our friends feel, but what's the top of the top of the top? You know, How are they processing? How are they doing?
Getting a different viewpoint, because, you know, we have a narrow window that we get to see through, and being able to see, okay, this is what our leaders are thinking. This is what they're doing. These are the people that our leaders actually are, not just, hey, it's the mayor, you know, that figure, you know, there's a person behind the figure. And
well, I appreciate this. And I will tell you this. I continue to do, particularly because the weather's nice again. I'm going to keep doing my neighborhood walks. And if I walk through your neighborhood, don't be scared. Don't run indoors, close the shades like, oh.
Hey, it's the weatherman.
It's tell you, come on out like, Brian Busby. I'm like, y'all know I don't look like Brian Busby. But, you know, he got hair, you know, everything. But anyway. But, yeah, I mean, do that. And then I think the other thing is, you know, talk to us as best you can. If you ever need to get a message all the way up this way, feel free to share it. Quinton.lucas@kcmo.org. If you really want to Google, I'll put my cell phone number out. And oddly enough, there's some people who use it all the time. Some nice, some not. But on the whole, I want to hear from you too, and so that's why I appreciate this. That's why I appreciate this program. The probably the hardest thing. I promise I'll stop talking soon.
You can stay as long as you want.
Is that the problem with all of our professions and how other people see it is I think that it's all locked in, let's say 1980 is how they think we do our jobs, and they're not necessarily thinking about what you deal with, everything else. And that's why I appreciate you doing this, because I think there are a lot of people who would say, what, firefighters doing a podcast? And you're like, yeah, because we're well-rounded beings, right? We're actually humans. And yes, we do some superhuman stuff, but we still go home to families. We still have hearts and souls and all that sort of stuff. And I just thank you for making sure that we have that voice and that opportunity for Kansas Cityans to see it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. So, everybody, thanks for stopping by. And if you're struggling, reach out. There are resources out there. If you know somebody that's struggling, reach out. Let them know there are resources out there. Let them know that you care. And, yeah, we'll see you next time.